Hello, rollers. Hello, friends, family, supporters all over. Thank you so much for listening to the Roll Report. It's been a year. It's been a whole year, and the show is still going. We are still loving what we're doing, and we're going to keep doing it. But to say a little thank you and to kind of acknowledge that we've been working hard for a year, we are going to present to everybody the full interview with Connie Chang, our first ever interview, and I still cannot believe they were so gracious as to say yes to a random stranger on the internet who wanted to talk to them. Connie is absolutely one of my icons and heroes in the space, the GM I aspire to be in the fullness of time, and I was so delighted to talk to them, and I am so happy to share the full version of our interview, the full unedited interview with all of you. Thank you for making our first year of this podcast so much fun, and we look forward to doing it a lot more. We'll get back to the campaign and the rest of the things starting next week, but for now, please enjoy our full interview with Connie Chang. Hello and welcome to the first ever edition of Classin Up the Joint. This is the part of the show where we talk to amazing people that are super inspiring about their favorite character classes. I am super excited for my first ever guest here, and also super nervous and maybe fanboying a little bit hard. We'll see. And I'm going to let my first guest introduce themselves because it's one of the many things that I find amazing and super inspiring is how practiced it is. Please go ahead.
It's me. Wow. I feel like there are great expectations foisted upon me for this intro, so just watch me stumble over my words immediately.
10 seconds or less.
Okay, I'm going to try to do it. I'm going to elevator pitch it. But hello, friends and family, question mark. Loved ones who are tuning in. I am Connie Chang. My pronouns are they, he, and she. You can find me across the internet at by Connie Chang. That's BYCONNICHANG. You might know me as the game master and creative producer of Transplanar RPG, which is an all-transgender, people of color led TTRPG show set in an original non-colonial anti-Orientalist multiverse. I'm not sure exactly when this is going to release, but as of the recording, very psyched to share that we are currently between main campaigns. And the second main campaign of Transplanar is going to be launching at the end of Pride Month, June 2023, which I'm really excited about. And I'm also so excited to be here and to talk about all things character class.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I know that it was like a solid 3-year campaign or more that just wrapped.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think technically it was like 2.5 years since our very first stream, but I've been planning and working on the Second Stranger and Transplanar as a channel since like over 3 years ago at this point, I would say.
Amazing.
Like the idea came like in 2019, 2020.
I feel like I am discovering this thing where the game that I'm running now, like I started a bunch during the first few months of the pandemic. I started, I think, 7, ranging from like every other week to a couple were every week, a couple were like once a month. But in the 3 years, the game that is still going started with Waterdeep Dragon Heist, went to this like whole other random thing, and we're like kind of wrapping a different like political instability in Waterdeep arc, and they're only at level 9.
Wow. That's how it is.
We haven't missed a bunch of them, but I'm just like, wow.
That's literally how it is, though, because it's so funny that the Second Stranger, I think in game, over a year has passed in the campaign, even though it's been like a 2.5, 3 year long campaign, which I think is the biggest triumph of the show, that we were actually able to pass time and it wasn't just like 2 weeks.
Yes.
Like, oh, let's go from level 3 to level 20 in 2 weeks, which happens so frequently, especially in long-term campaigns, because like you do like 10,000 different things in the course of 48 hours, right?
And each session, you're like, well, that's been 3-4 hours, however long your session is in real time. And that was like, one combat. Oh, that was a minute and a half of game time.
Yeah. What? That was 3 seconds? This entire session was 3 seconds? Yeah, I completely feel that.
Amazing. Well, to the first point of our podcast and our interview today, Connie, what is your favorite D&D character class?
That is a really hard question to answer, even though I knew I was going to have to answer it for this segment. So I have several. I am not going to rank them.
Fair.
I'm gonna narrow it down to a couple, and then maybe we can like winnow it down to just a single winner. So there's a bit of a bias because these are all classes I've played. So I'm not going to include classes I haven't played necessarily. So that immediately disqualifies Druid. And I also don't think I've played Ranger, right? So it's not because
Who
it's
has,
or Cleric.
really?
Or Cleric.
Kidding,
Not the
kidding.
Ranger shade.
I give them a lot of shade, and then I have sort of played one, and I'm like, okay, they take 10 plus levels to kind of really get going in some ways, but they're kind of cool, some of them. Listen.
I mean, Gloomstalker Ranger is pretty cool. Of the underloved classes, the Gloomstalker Ranger subclass really, I think it's one of the best of that class. It really punches it up, I think, especially if you pair it with like an Assassin Rogue or something, which is like such a classic multi-classing pairing, right? But yes, I would say of the classes I have played, my favorites would probably be Barbarian, Wizard, or Bard. And I think for the flavor reasons, I always look at it from like a flavor narrative story engine standpoint of my favorite class, because I'm less invested in like the mechanical punch. How I am as a GM is like, you can play whatever you want, and like, I'll make sure behind the scenes that your character is still valuable to the party and doing cool and interesting things. Like, I'm not gonna use like, maybe perhaps a less even design against you necessarily on my end as a facilitator. Just come to me with your cool ideas and we'll go from there. So from a cool idea standpoint, I think the Barbarian class has some really cool ideas. I really like the ideas. I just like bards because I think if I were to have a class in real life, I would be a bard. So I'm kind of biased that way. And I like wizards too because I specifically really like the Chronergy Wizard, which I got the absolute honor and pleasure of getting to play for a campaign season on Three Black Halflings for their Outlaws and Obelisks campaign. And I had a ton of fun with Chronergy Wizard there.
Absolutely. Okay, so the super fast breakdown of each of these, right? Barbarians, we get our D12 of hit dice. You get the most hit points, assuming you roll well, or if you do your fixed hit points. Ton of good proficiencies, good starting things. Then we go with Rage, Unarmored Defense, all the fun class features, your Primal Path features that come into play, Brutal Crits, super, super fun, and that awesome 20th level Primal Champion where you can just naturally bump your strength and con above 20 without needing to like find or buy some insane giant belt.
Like a belt. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and super, super fun. Bards, we get our D8, pretty solid mid-range hit points. Fun spell lists, and your magical secrets, and your inspirations. And the like escalating inspiration die, and what was the? I've never gotten a bard to level 20, so superior inspiration. Okay, can regain inspiration, and I have to agree on the wizard. Like it's not only the flavor, but I feel like how you can build it and focus on such different qualities of spells.
I would say wizard just in terms of if we're just thinking pure rules as written, just pure raw, wizard is one of the strongest classes out there, I would say, in terms of just like mechanics and utility and access to spells. I think it's hard to beat a wizard, especially a player who knows the rules and like knows their wizard really well. It's really difficult to beat a wizard on that front. But again, the approach with which I'm evaluating my favorite class is a little bit mechanics, but mostly flavor, mostly like the lore and its ability to generate narrative.
Well, and I think that some of the class things are really interesting too. Like, you're giving up your hit points almost immediately unless you find one item or other that like gives you a really strong constitution, roll really amazing stats. And it's also funny to me that how many things are subclass specific. They're basic things. You get arcane recovery in your arcane tradition. You get kind of one more ability score improvement than some other classes, and your spell mastery. But then, like, so many things are about what specific subclass features you get at various stopping points along that level progression.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I know one D&D, like they are interested in changing their approach to the wizard class. So it's not just like based on the different, I think, schools of magic. But I'm not too familiar on the specifics of that.
I've been sort of following it and then got really busy, and I have not looked into like the last couple releases. I know a few people seem to be really upset. Although this is, at least one of them is someone who is basically upset about every rule change ever and has kind of been like, you know what, I'm going to Pathfinder all the time now or something. Also the person who I think has broken characters in games that we've played together more than anyone else.
That's fascinating. What do you mean by broken characters? Like they min-max or they exploit rule
They
loopholes?
min-max both, you know. I think a lot with people that I play with about Bartle's taxonomy of players. Are you familiar with this at all?
Not Bartles, but I am familiar with the idea of different player archetypes.
It was an approach to that. I think it was one of the earlier ones, and you know, some dead white guy. I think his name. It'd
be hilarious if he were dead. If he were still alive.
Oh wow, yeah. If Bartle's alive, apologies to the ether. And it's it is the four kinds of players that I think they looked at multiplayer games, and then they also like it in subsequent years they ignored it. But I think of it as there are explorers, completionists, socialists, and breakers, or I think their taxonomy is killers. So the explorers are people that want to do everything. You know, you want to be in a massive open world and like see everything. Completionists want to complete every single task, acquire every single item, do all the side quests. Socialists want to, in an online setting, like engage with other players. They're there for like for the league, for the guild, for the clan, for that interaction. Or in a solo game would be more there for, you know, if there's a romance option, if you have to do social interactions as skills to raise whatever points you have with your companions in the game. And killers or breakers are in online games ones that want to kill other people. There's a weird sort of in the original taxonomy, like a focus on what I would call like bad faith players that, you know, really high level character hang out where low level characters congregate and griefers, kill all of them all the time.
Yeah, griefers, campers, the people who try to break the game too. Yeah, no, yeah.
And then I think of it as just breakers, people that want to break the game for whatever reason. So this person that I was referencing, like they definitely min-max their characters a lot, and then they will design the characters around very specific ideas around how the mechanics will work to just do something crazy. They built one that was it was like a Simic hybrid mutant blood hunter with some alchemist, artificer, and monk levels. And it turned into this thing, we play in a Discord community, and it turned into a character that every other DM did not want to have in a battle because they could, as I remember it, end up stun locking an opponent and then just wailing on them with the Simic hybrid tail thing and doing bonkers damage. And like DMs got really, and that's just one example of many, many characters this person made that was like, what weird multi-class will give me something crazy?
So I think that's actually a really fun way of approaching play at the right table and in the right situation, right? I could see that as being an absolute nightmare to have to play with, especially if like the table they were going to play at, if I were GMing, was like very story focused, and usually how I like to run my sessions, I just kind of be like, hey man, I don't think you're going to get what you want to get out of playing D&D at my table, right? So it's probably bad for everyone involved if you didn't play here. But that it's really funny you say that, because I'm actually again, not sure when this is going to come out, so I can't say too many things if this comes out before it is fully announced. But I have been invited, let's say, and this is not just the one time, but several times to like a competitive D&D settings, essentially, where it's like a dungeon crawl where you have to survive and like use the rules as written, or like it's like a free for all like battle royale situation where it's like PvP all the way. And in those situations, I do find myself going on Reddit and going on forums and being like, what is the most broken build I can make to survive and kill other like characters and survive in a dungeon setting, right? So like that's kind of like the one situation where I can see myself wanting to like go with like a breaker or a killer mindset, because that's the situation where I think that would be a lot of fun. And if I like knew I was going into a PvP situation, or I knew that the table or the miniseries or the campaign I was going to be playing in was going to be a grind house, like dungeon grind, I think there's a time and a place for those kinds of builds and that approach to gaming, right? But that's generally not.
And I always thought it was kind
of
fun. Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to approach how you build a character. Like, not only, like, I've definitely gone a couple times and like, I have not played that class. I am going to choose, God's help me, a ranger, you know, just as the challenge. What do I want to do with this character? And making them really broken is a totally valid way. If you have, I know someone else in the same way is like, how do I get the most insane modifier to anything? They figured out how to get a plus 20 something to initiative.
Wow.
Just because they're like, what happens if I theorycraft, if I build a level 20 only for this stat? And they did, you know, it was every, you know, alert, every feat and every character class and anything you could do that had anything to do with giving you an initiative bonus. And they found it, and like that gives them a lot of joy. And I'm just going, sure, have fun. I'm gonna be over here with my like, you know, mildly traumatized wizard who got kicked out of university because they teleported the dean's cat or whatever thing that you know. Amazing. Okay, so we've got 3.
Yes.
Can we narrow it down? Can we get to the favorite? I sympathize a lot with like, I also feel like I would have many bard levels and maybe pure bard if I was to, you know, character class my own self. But like I said, wizards are hard to beat. Barbarians have like tons of flavor, so much fun. Yeah.
I would say between the 3, I'm just going to have to, I think, I'm going to have to favor the barbarian just for like, I mean, I'm an Aries. Listen, Anger is my middle name. Connie Angry Chang. So I'm going to have to go with barbarian. I love bards. I love wizards. They're both great. They also get a lot of love. Otherwise, I feel like barbarians are honestly, they can sometimes be a little underrated. I don't see them too much on streams. I don't see them too much, in podcasts, or even at tables. I think I've only ever GM'd one barbarian ever.
Wow.
Yeah, as a player at my tables. And I think I've GM'd so many tables and so many players at this point. I think I've only ever GM'd one barbarian. So I wanna spread the barb love.
Hell yes.
And I also need to represent barbarians because I play one on Vanna's channel for higher education. We're currently on a hiatus, but for the first season I played this character called Mystagogue Zua Graves. She goes by Stag. Total she, her, thembo. She, they, thembo, you know, herbo, what have you. Big, muscular, jock, Goliath, you know the drill. Barbarian, you know, looks really tough, kind of seems like a douchebag on the surface, but is also really sweet, like genuinely very sweet. And deep inside, she just wants to play music. She has an axe, right? Like an axe that can go both ways, just like she does.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And,
I love it.
Yeah, it's like a classic. It's so funny because Stag is kind of in a High School Musical movie, right? Where like her dad's are like, you have to be a strong fighter. She's like, I just want to play music. But everyone else in that campaign is going through like how to get away with murder. And like we have someone who used to be an assassin. Like we have someone who's like is in a really bad like warlock situation, or we have someone else who's like having weird dreams about massive rock half gods that want to talk to them and commune with them. And meanwhile, Stag's here being like, I just want to write a song about a bad breakup I had.
Just want to have my emo moment. I'm imagining one of like the sort of stereotype heavy metal axe guitars too, but like a functional axe that somehow the bridge of the guitar is like still.
Yep.
Oh, that warms my heart in so many ways. I will say, should I ever happen to appear on any game that you're jamming, I will absolutely be a barbarian.
Yes, we need more barbarians.
Just to bring that love. I love barbarians too. I played a little bit of, I think, AD&D or 3.5 when I was 10, 11, and then long time off that I wish I had not taken. And when I got back into 5th edition a few years ago, my first character, I started going, okay, what do I want to do? Barbarian looks like you go and hit things.
Yeah.
And there's less to worry about. And so I went with the barbarian. He was a big silver dragonborn who had been like stolen from his family, so grew up as a pirate, very chaotic, neutral, not aligned with like traditional metallic dragonborn ideals at all. And over the course of the campaign, this was also a sort of weird homebrew set in Waterdeep with some of Waterdeep canon. So we did part of the dragon heist and got to meet the ancient gold dragon that lives under the city. And my character was like, oh, I don't just like intimidate people and drink and fuck whoever I want consensually and and just occasionally rob people and maybe I shouldn't have this network of street urchins that feeds me information. And got to have this much longer, I'm still gonna rage. He's also, his battle cry was a long, mighty yell of spoon when he charged into battle. And adopted a warg pup named Muffin at a certain point, too.
Oh, Muffin. I love that. Yeah, the best part, the draw of the barbarian is the rage, right? It's the factor of the rage. And I really love it when barbarian players come up with really fun ways to flavor their rage. I've shared a table with a barbarian. I think Totem Warrior was Ancestral Guardian, Ancestral Guardian,
Very cool subclass.
Yes, the way that Nomadic played the barbarian. This was on the Forge Academy, I believe, was the podcast, and this was a spinoff series. And Gnome's barbarian was like this old bugbear, very, very old, like an elder. And
yeah.
When they would rage, their ancestral spirits would come out and guide them, right? And I thought that was super cool, and I feel like that's such a rich way for the flavor of the subclass itself to come out.
Yeah.
And Stag is also the same subclass. I was kind of inspired by Gnome's performance actually, and flavored her rage as she gets angry, and then she has this kind of ancestral stone lion ancestor who would roar out from her body and sweep forward and empower her attacks.
I love that.
Yeah, so it's also really fun to me when I see barbarians flavoring their rage not just as anger, but as passion in other ways, right? So it could be just a passion for art or a passion, a desire to protect their friends.
I feel so strongly about that painting.
Exactly. Because ultimately, at its core, to me, rage. I mean, you touched upon it perfectly. It's just is an overabundance of feeling. It's an overabundance of passion and energy and inspiration, right? And that just feels like such a rich storytelling opportunity, right?
Yeah.
We have this character whose powers come from the fact that they feel a lot, and that emotion and that connection, depending on their subclass, to different ways that emotion can express itself, is what makes them special, is what makes them an adventurer, is what makes them powerful and magical. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think people come up with some really interesting ways to flavor it too. Even just anger, having a character who begins their journey as someone who is just very angry all the time, and how does a party help them grow? How does their rage change?
Exactly.
And thinking about kind of everybody's giant big brother in the room. I on Critical Role, I hadn't actually listened to most of the first campaign, but I've been watching the series. And having, Grog have this whole moment of where does your strength come from? Slight spoilers, it comes from his friends. That being where some of his rage comes from as the series has gone along. Because I think they're, pretty mid-level or higher level by the time the animated series comes out. I'm also so curious to know what Matt has cooked up for this particular subclass that in the new campaign for Classin with this, have you been following?
I haven't been following C3, no.
I think Matt has written another new subclass similar to the Paladin one from last time, and it is something to do with weird chaos energy. It seems like a little extension of some of the Graviturgy and Dunamancy that he's come up with for that campaign setting for this barbarian character. There's an element of wild magic, and something weird happens every time with a little D8 table every time the character rages.
That's pretty cool.
Usually based on anger, but I'm just oh yes, new class, new subclass, gimme.
Yeah, I think that's pretty dope because I think that really taps into one of the core draws of Barbarian to me as well. They feel like the sorcerers of the martial category to me, where their martial power isn't through training, which are fighters, right? Some kind of experience and background. Yeah. It's not through a connection to nature and a knowledge of the land and the world around them, which is, I think, where a lot of Ranger's kind of a mixed martial magic a little bit. But they still do have martial capabilities. They're also not I feel like Rogue sits in a similar place as Fighter a lot of the time. They're kind of sneaky. They're sneaky fighters essentially, right? But Barbarians have that because a lot of the Barbarians I've seen who play don't necessarily flavor themselves as super knowledgeable of martial maneuvers. You just got to go in and hit stuff, right? But that's what
I'm
makes
big,
you powerful.
I hit things.
Exactly.
My magically empowered rage or strong feeling, whatever, is going to win the day and going to help me land that brutal critical, land the hit that I need. Yeah, and especially looking at the Path of Wild Magic and several of the subclasses seem heavily magical in spite of the whole you can't cast a spell when you're raging thing.
That's such a huge, if that weren't a rule, I feel like a lot more people would play Barbarian because the shenanigans you'd be able to get up to.
Yes.
I might just homebrew a magic item that lets you cast spells while raging.
I made one sort of for that first barbarian that I mentioned, my first character in 5e, where we stopped the campaign after a while, and then we got back together for a special bump yourself up 5 levels, one shot. And I was okay, I want some Echo Knight now because I want this cool bonus action second thing, and also can I make this item? There's no good axes, and my DM was sure. And I made an axe that did fit very well with this character, did a d6 of lightning damage and allowed you to cast chain lightning once a day regardless of your rage. I don't know if I fit it actually within rules as written, and probably not, but I was just this axe casts the thing. You just as long as you, the character, are raging, a barbarian and holding this axe, you can cast that spell once per long rest. Because I was just I just want the image of this character hitting something with this axe and the magical explosion of lightning powered by his rage affecting everyone else in the room. It's I don't know. Yeah, I would love... I understand the need for balance, and I still want to cast spells when I'm raging.
Yes. Absolutely. That's... the idea of Thor slamming down a huge explosion of magical energy and thunder and lightning. That's you can't beat that. You can't beat that. That's why Barbs are my favorite, because you can just punch really hard and make things explode with how hard you punch them.
Yes.
That's what I like about that class. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. So we have narrowed down favorite class, and now the nitty-gritty. Favorite subclass, or what is in the running for favorite subclass? Doesn't need to be a barb, but anywhere. What do you think?
Ooh, well, I've spoken about this a few times. I would say the Path of the Ancestral Guardian for Barbarian, I really enjoy. I just really like the flavor of it. This idea, because it generates such an interesting character story already. You have this innate connection to your family, to your ancestors,
Yeah.
to the people who came before you, right? So that I think gives the GM a lot to work with, right? If you're picking that subclass, it gives the GM a lot to work with to fold into the story. It gives you a lot to work with as a player and as a performer to like, you know, what's your relationship with these spirits? Like, how did you learn to first tap into it? Like, you know, like, what did they demand of you? How do they feel about you? Like, stuff like that. I think there's just a lot of rich material there. Also mentioned this before. I really like the Chronergy Wizard. I think it's also Divination Wizard for kind of similar reasons. I think some of the abilities they get are just some of the coolest and most unique in D&D, rules as written. Like the Divination Wizard gets those portent dice, which are super cool. I played a Divination Wizard once, back in college. I had a blast playing her. I really enjoyed rolling those portent dice, and the ability to swap that D20 out with any D20 that gets rolled is incredible, which is why I always ask my dice to roll really high and roll really low for my portent dice, because that's what you want. Yeah.
I agree. It's so cool. There's nothing more disappointing than rolling those and going like,
it's a 14
10
and a 15.
and a 12.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Like you can kind of bank on those as kind of average or middling rolls, but I guess that's kind of the trade-off of having that very powerful mechanic. So I really like portent die that come with Divination Wizard. Just a lot of the Chronergy abilities of like, I think there's one where you can like basically try a roll again, like basically the equivalent of kind of like the lucky feat, but like phrased kind of differently. Like anything that gives you a little bit of an extra edge that lets you re-roll dice is just like, in D&D with such a swingy core resolution mechanic is incredibly powerful. So picking up anything that lets you just like have advantage or like roll multiple times, especially if you can affect other people's rolls, is very, very useful. And it's not just utility, it's also flavor. Like you're rewinding time, like you're turning back time. You're like, you know, like doing a quick recall. And I think that's really cool. And any sort of like time travel stuff, I have such a weak spot for. I really like time magic.
Totally.
As a player, as a GM, I think it's a ton of fun. It is a headache to have to facilitate sometimes, especially because the kinds of worlds I like to build have very specific magic systems. So like and specific lore around how like the universe works. So like if people go around and just willy-nilly doing time stuff, I'm like, oh god, okay, give me a second. I need to figure out.
And there must be consequences of some sort.
Exactly. And you can't just go around just doing time magic willy-nilly all the time and getting everything you want because that's not interesting. So it was just so funny because I have ran an entire arc that was based on a time loop, Groundhog Day, in my first campaign. And not to spoil too much, but the second campaign has some stuff to do with time magic as well.
Okay.
There's some time things involved. So I really made this bed for myself, and I'm sleeping in it. But I'm excited to see what. Again, without spoiling too much, what people who may or may not be involved in time stuff will do with it. So Chronergy.
We're not spoiling anything. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, I'm keeping my lips sealed tight.
Okay.
But yeah, Chronergy, Divination.
Ancestral Guardian.
Yes, Ancestral Guardian. I do like Gloomstalker too. Gloomstalker Ranger. I think it makes the Ranger class worth playing in a lot of ways, and it's fun. It's fun. You can just like become invisible in shadow. That's cool as hell, and has such great multi-classing like synergy, especially with Rogue. What other I really like College of Glamour for Bard. Again, I like the flavor a lot because I like playing really hot, it's like sociable characters. Totally. So like College of Glamour Bard, you really can't. I mean, that's one of the hottest classes and subclasses.
It's very much that.
Just rules as written, right? Just objectively speaking, it's one of the hottest classes and subclasses out there, right? So yeah, it's just so many great subclasses to choose from. I feel like there's one that Echo Knight, of course. Echo Knight is great. Echo Knight is cool as hell because it's so weird. It's so weird, like an Echo.
Yes.
What? That's super specific, but also very fun. Yes. Very fun. I had the pleasure of facilitating an Echo Knight during a home game. And that was fun to see how the player flavored that. And I will be playing an Echo Knight soon. And I'm excited. I'm excited cool. to put them in action.
They're a lot of fun. Wow. Okay. super fast. Let's see if we can do super fast rundown. I have pulled up these things on D&D Beyond, and because I was like, I want to be able to have the information, and I don't know if you want to pull it up, we can trade off a little bit. But like, okay, Gloomstalkers. All the ranger features that we're not going to talk about. You get the fun and adventurous Gloomstalker magic features at 3rd level, some cool spells, Dread Ambusher, a wisdom bonus to your initiative, and like extra special first turn of combat to things. Dark vision that goes out. Wow, right. I never look at rangers. I didn't even remember half of these things. Gaining proficiency in wisdom, and if you already have it, you get intelligence or charisma instead. Once each at 11th level, an extra attack if you miss as part of the same action, and you can impose disadvantage on people at 15th level if they don't have advantage already. Wow. Yeah. Good stuff.
It's some good stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
it actually kind of beefs up the ranger class. It's one of the most popular ranger subclasses for a reason, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I think the Dread Ambusher is really good. Oh, right. There's the extra parts of that of like extra walking speed and additional weapon attack and an extra D8 of damage.
You can't say no to that. You can't say no to that. Yeah. And the thing about that is too, like, there's also great flavor, right? If you want to play an edgelord, boom. There you go. If you want to play an edgelord that can actually do some serious damage, boom, there you go. Like Gloomstalker Ranger, go. Pair it with an assassin rogue.
Combine it with what's it? Blood Hunter, and have like all the edge. Yep. So much edge, so much lore.
Just dripping with it. Just dripping.
I'm looking forward to a future interview with a friend who is madly in love with Blood Hunters, and we frequently have the argument where I think they are whiny sad boys, rules as written, or like whiny kind of like goth emo boys or J gender characters. Like, I'm just like, there's just so much in there the way they're written to make them just like sad and tortured and haunted and so much backstory trauma. And it is part of why I don't like them, as well as kind of finding their mechanics a little weird. But like, I am anticipating we're just going to have this like hard back and forth. They're like, no, they're amazing.
So the thing about Blood Hunter, I would be remiss if I didn't say this, as Oka is my beloved Blood Hunter. Oka is a character on the Second Stranger, which is the first main campaign on Transplanar that just wrapped beginning of 2023. Oka Hien, played by C. Thomas, who is also my producer and dramaturg and my partner. So what I like about the Blood Hunter class is its potential, is its storytelling potential, because so much of it's basically Witcher. You're a Witcher. You're playing a Witcher.
Yeah.
But specifically, I homebrewed a subclass for Oka that basically made them a blood mage, like a blood bender, and like really focusing on the blood part of Blood Hunter, right? So kind of like a martial class that can tap into the blood and the life force of other creatures that exist and manipulate that to their own advantage and have that innate connection to kind of the soul and the body via the blood. And this also worked in very well with some of this homebrew world building lore I had set up around the divine triptych, which was something I created. This idea of a living being is comprised of three main parts: the body, the mind, and the soul. And blood hunters are masters over one aspect of the body, blood, right? And there are also in my world like bone magicians and flesh magicians and blood magicians, right? And they're all kind of also necromancers, right? Because when you control the vessels and the expressions of life, you also kind of control death in a way, right? C did really cool stuff throughout the entire campaign where, like, for instance, if Oka hit 0 or like was in a tough spot, they would like flavor them popping back up to 1 as like forcing their own heart to keep pumping. And they would like use their magic to make that blood continue to circulate, or they would like calm their anxiety by like slowing down their heart rate, or like increasing people's anxiety by making their heart rate elevate, right? Or like pulling on poison that might be in people's blood.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
I feel like that is such a great example of like, player maybe, I don't know where the idea started, but player has cool idea. GM goes like, yes, I will make that happen because it is amazing storytelling and flavor, and like make a whole subclass. And to have your player then be able to really maximize their usage of it and do so in some really creative and weird ways. Like,
Yes,
I love that.
absolutely.
Like, I love that for you guys. That's so cool.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely very much the kind of GM who will make stuff for you if you ask, or like if you clearly have like, have a really strong passion or a really strong idea that fits with the world. But that isn't exactly being reflected in the mechanics that we have access to.
Sure.
Like I'll say, screw it, I'll do it. Like give me what you want and I'll come up with something for you.
That is a certain level of confidence that I am envious of. Like I'm getting better at that, about not only using rules written and only like I'm okay with items. I'm like I know how to balance an item and like give you at least a cool toy to play with. I'm getting better about like trying to build some big bads or like things with some legendary actions and make it not have to pull from the monster manual and its expanded editions. But like a whole subclass, or to look at the new big sibling in the room, Worlds Beyond Number, like having a whole new witch class designed specifically for huge brain fart, not Abria, Erica, for Erica Ishii, and Brennan Lee Mulligan, and I don't remember who else, but like making the whole new class and bring that in, like. There's a level of confidence I'm going to say to you as a GM that it's one of the many reasons I find you very inspiring and was
thank you.
Really excited to get to talk to you.
I appreciate that. And listen, Colin, for what it's worth, my secret is I just don't worry about balance. Balance too. I throw her out the window, right? I look for the cool flavor. I look for the cool, story opportunities that the mechanics can present. Homebrewing is game design, right? So like I really cut my teeth on first homebrewing 5e before I gained the confidence myself and a little bit of experience to start actually making my own independent game systems. And so much of this like confidence also comes from like playing other systems and seeing what they do well, and also tapping in on the like what makes D&D fun for you. And I learned very quickly, very early on in my GMing journey, that what made GMing fun for me wasn't fretting over actions, reactions, encumbrance, spell slots like that. I was like, whatever, who cares about that? I care about the story, right? And I care about the mechanics that help facilitate an interesting story, right? So like, the way I'm sure you're familiar with, as a listener or / audience member of Transplaner, like the way we run things is very flexible, right? It's very like we are not beholden to raw. We are very rule of cool, but we see the mechanics as a tool for us to tell the story. And if it doesn't behoove us to use the mechanics in a certain way, then we just will discard it. Like I have like cut up, smashed, destroyed, burnt up, Frankenstein stitched together different aspects of the D&D rule set and brought in my own stuff and made my own thing about it to make the campaign work for us. Like the way we do initiative, the way we run combat, super different. Like it is not, it's hardly recognizable as D&D, I would say, especially by Arcade. The stuff I was doing with the precepts by the end of by the end of the campaign, who are these like, a little bit of a spoiler, they're like basically like more powerful than gods, entities, architects of reality, essentially. And I was like, if I'm playing a creature, if I'm playing an entity that is an architect of reality, why the hell would they have a stat block? Right? Like they wouldn't have AC, they wouldn't have HP, they're unkillable. Right? They're not, and that's not the point of encountering.
They decide to do a thing, they do a thing, and like,
exactly.
Exactly.
So stuff like that, even at a lower level, when back in like Arc 3, Arc 2, when I was running, I think I ran like a false Hydra encounter. I did my kind of own spin on a false Hydra, especially because there were some safety concerns around memory erasure. And that came up. We discovered that organically, that was a line that we weren't aware of before. So I, reflavored it, to make it work for the table. And whenever my players did something kind of unusual or weird about the encounter that wasn't just I hit the thing with my axe, like I would reward it. I'd be like, that's great, lovely. And I think just my players organically have like we think just running up to something and hitting it a lot is kind of boring, right? Like, so let's think of out of the box ways of tackling this encounter. And also there are stakes to this encounter that aren't just, these random people attack this and we have to kill them now, right? Like, this will drive the story forward. Like, if we don't stop this monster, then this place will be destroyed and we care about this place. Or like, this NPC has information that we need and they're not giving it to us, so we kind of have to beat them up a little bit and then they'll give it to us, right? Or this NPC like is holding someone hostage, like stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of ways to inject stakes into an encounter and to your own game design within your campaign that will help elevate your players' engagement with mechanics above just the rules.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that I appreciated when I started listening to Transplaner is how I'm remembering even like I think one of the early travel montages is you were like, well, now we're going to do a relationship building game. And there's some dice to be rolled mostly around who you're talking to and interacting with. But it was like, that is a really good way of essentially forcing your players to roleplay with each other a little bit. But like also like what is going to come out of these characters? What is going to come out of that relationship that has been strengthened or damaged as it might be in that moment? And if I may, just keeping an eye on the time, as I was listening to the finale, I was like, how did you organize these battles? What they're like multiple stages of thing, and as you're saying, like the precepts getting involved, and yeah, again with an eye on the time, I was hoping you could speak a little more just about how you constructed that and like what sort of rules you're like, that rule doesn't make any sense, let me make something new.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, big spoiler warning for the end of the first campaign, The Second Stranger on Transplaner RPG. Big spoilers for Arc 8. So if you're interested in listening to the campaign and you care about spoilers, you should skip to the end where we introduce ourselves, and I thank Colin for their time.
Start at the beginning, and then in a few months when you've listened to all of it, you'll have forgotten all of this.
Yes, exactly. But basically, I kind of knew going into Arc 8, which was 8 episodes long, that I wanted the whole arc to kind of be an extended boss fight. Because I'm like, this is the finale of our campaign. Like, it's got to be big. It's got to have really cool set-piece combat encounters, and it's got to be punchy, and it can't lag. Like, I have to keep the momentum going, which are diametrically opposed to the design principles behind D&D 5th edition, which every piece of design, especially when it comes to combat, points the table towards slog. And that's just how it is.
Yes.
I'm not dunking on D&D. I play D&D a lot.
I think especially by the time you get to level 20, when you're like, I have so many abilities and cool items, and I gotta roll 17 die.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Like, I have like 1,000 things on my character sheet. What am I even going to do this turn? And there was also the added thing. This was like kind of like a multiversal war that I was running, right? So there were literally hundreds, if not thousands, of NPC combatants technically who were also there. So I was like, I'm not going to roll it. I'm not going to roll it. Like, no way. I think, there was an approach where I could have rolled initiative for different factions. But then I was like, you know what? I also have 8 players. I was facilitating 8 players in initiative for like 3 or 4 entire sessions. So I was like, how do I make this interesting and dynamic and like not just an absolute slog and like a nightmare to get through? So I came up with the idea of a countdown clock pretty early, because the big bad that they were fighting, Oblivion, a precept, like the embodiment of the concept of nothingness, right? I'm like, okay, Oblivion is not. Okay, so we all know that she's not killable, right? In the traditional sense. And the players, the PCs going in, their goal wasn't to kill Oblivion because they knew it was impossible. Their goal was to distract them long enough to try to find a weakness, or to like probe for more information and like get this other character that was stuck inside their head, stuck inside their mind space, like to come out and like help them, right? So that was the goal. It was always ever distraction and information gathering, right? And like keeping the NPCs that they cared about safe during combat. So going into that, I was like, okay, Oblivion, like I always start with my villain, right? Villain as in the obstacle, the person that the antagonist, right? That the protagonists are combating. Not necessarily like bad person, right? Because we complicate the idea of Oblivion being an evil person at the end of the show. So I'm like, okay, what does this villain want out of this combat encounter. Like what really does she want? Because if she wanted to just insta-kill everyone here, she could snap her fingers and do it, right? So why is she doing this fight? And it's because it's her swan song. It's the last thing she gets to do before she has to annihilate this place, because she can't stop herself from annihilating this place because fate sucks, right? Because fate has pinned her
she's
into doing
bound
this.
by some rules, bound by her own nature as well. And if she's going to have one last memory of this place before it's gone,
she wants it to be special. So she's having fun.
Amazing.
So that was important to me. I was like, at the beginning of this fight, she's having fun. She's enjoying, not just really even toying like a cat with a mouse with the PCs, but like there's a part of her that is genuinely rooting for the PCs. There's a part of her that knows it's impossible for them to beat her, but kind of wants them to beat her anyway, but she knows it's not possible. Like, right? She just knows it can't happen. So she's not going to give herself the foolish action of hoping that it can happen. So she's thinking of this as she's putting on a show for herself. And she wants the show to be perfect. And if the PCs try to like talk to her like she's a person and appeal to her better side, she's like, you're going off script. Don't try to talk to me like I'm worth something, because I'm not, you know, so it's really complicated for her, right? So I'm like, that's the mindset I'm in when I'm embodying her, when I'm role-playing as her against the PCs. So what would she do mechanically if that's her mindset? Well, she would make this a spectacle. So we staged it on a literal stage, is where like the final like the concert for the end of the world is what we called it, right? I love that. I also like came up with a countdown clock. I made it diegetic too. I had this big number appear in the sky, right? That started at 8 for the 8 gods of Endake, and would count down at the end of each round, and no one knew what would happen if it got to 0, right? But like it's pretty obvious that there's a big countdown clock in the sky that by the time it gets to 0, probably the fight's going to be over in some way, and it's probably not going to be great for you.
Something major is going to happen. Probably not going to end well for our PCs.
Yes. Exactly. So that the countdown clock, I think, added a sense of tension and a sense of like, oh my God, we don't know what's going to happen, but it's there. And that's ominous, right? And also this idea of I did this thing. I homebrewed, I think, the fate and doom tracker. So like if and at the beginning of each, something else I did was I asked my players to roll a d20 at the beginning of each Arc 8 episode without telling them what it was for. And I would record all of their numbers, and like I wouldn't tell them what it was for. And now because it's over, I can actually reveal what it was for. I was counting the number of collective natural 20s that they would roll and get. And if they hit a certain amount that I had hidden from the table, then that would be when fate and magic would arrive to stop the fight. And it literally just so lined up that like I got the final nat 20 we needed, I think episode 7 or episode 6 of Arc 8, which was really exciting. And the Fate and Doom tracker was a way for me to also add tension before we got into the boss fight proper in the first 4 episodes of Arc 4, where I would have each of them make what I called war effort rolls, which was kind of like a skill challenge, like an extended skill challenge, basically, right? And every success would nudge the Fate and Doom tracker either toward Fate, or every failure would nudge it toward Doom. And it just so happened that it hit Doom. Yeah, during like episode 2 or episode 3 of Arc 8. And I had a little random table that I rolled on for a terrible thing that would happen to the world, because the world is ending if it hit Doom. Right. And what ended up happening was the sea evaporated and the mountains got obliterated, right? Which was a big deal. And a lot of fun for me personally.
Yeah. I love that. I love how much thought you put into it, and like how you're able to construct that from a narrative and character place first. Like that, I think is really, really cool. And rather than solely, it should be big and bombastic and amazing and a countdown clock in the sky. It should just be dramatic. But like, no, it's still rooted in the character, even if, you know, the players at that point might not understand Oblivion and her wants and desires. Like, that you're coming from that place.
And so much of, I know we're coming up on time here, but just final little thing from me, is so much of that was made possible because of so many above the table discussions I had with my cast. Like everyone bought in to the idea that we're not trying to kill Oblivion. And there was also some discussion about, you know, we did a session 0 at the beginning of every arc, so we would know the themes going into the arc and, like, you know, the general trajectory of the arc without spoilers necessarily, but just so they knew how to facilitate their own characters' performance and growth, which was really critical, not just for a campaign but for an actual play specifically. So everyone knew going in that, hey, Oblivion isn't like the capital B, capital G bad guy, right? There's some complexity there. You're not going to, like, the point of the fight isn't to beat her. It's to do XYZ. Other than that, kind of go hog wild. And everyone was aware of that, was excited about it, and bought into it really well.
Yeah.
So I could foresee like pulling something like an invincible bad guy could frustrate some tables. If they're like, what's the point of you throwing this bad guy at me if I can't beat them and like kick the shit out of them? But it would work really well for other tables when they know that those aren't the stakes. Like that's not what this story is about. That's not what we're playing this campaign about. Right? This is a campaign about queer love, right? And accepting our brokenness and accepting our flaws, right? And what better way to illustrate that than having that love be extended to the villain as well, right?
Well, I think this also reflects the importance of those session zeros, not only at the beginning of your campaign to establish any red lines and whatever your, hey, I need to stop signal is, like all of that, but then to do that check-in when you come to the end or the beginning of a major arc and I agree. I've had a couple conversations with people about how live play differs from your home game. Your home game as a GM, maybe you never want to tell your players what's going on because it should always be a surprise. But when you have this element of you are performing for people, you get a better performance. I think if you have those check-ins, if you know
100%.
Sort of a little bit about what's going to come next and how your character can react with it.
Definitely. It's so crucial for a live play, for an actual play, for an audience especially. And also I think a lot of home tables and private games would benefit for having more consistent, like session zero, I think there's kind of like a culture around it of this is just something we do at the beginning of the campaign, and then we don't do it again. But I think more campaigns should do more frequent and consistent session zeros during specific like narrative parts of your campaign. Like for instance, like during like your like a heist campaign, right? Like you do a session there at the beginning, and then like you play through a couple sessions, and then you hit a point where like, oh my god, the entire party got caught by the city, and now you're on jail. That would be to me a really good part of the campaign to do another session zero. You like GM to players and go like, okay, what do you want out of this next arc? Because you're not doing heists anymore, at least for a bit. You're all in prison. Like, what are you interested in? What do you not want?
In fact, the next thing is the prison break, probably.
Exactly.
Or like,
so everyone's like, we want to do a prison break. Yeah, these are our wishes for the prison break. These are our wishes for the trial. That way, the GM also doesn't like prep a trial, right? And then all of the PCs in the next session are like, we're going to break out of the prison. And the GM's like, well, but I had a trial prepped, right? So like that also helps mitigate some of that. Right. And it's always good safety wise to just consistently check in. Safety is not just a one and done conversation. It's a consistent discussion that you need to have open avenues of trust and communication for it to work. I think that reflects how I like to think about like trust and consent in all these situations. It is never one and done. It is always sort of an ongoing, how do we all respectfully keep each other safe and like make sure we're working within each other's boundaries and playing together, gaming together, interacting together, relating together in a fun, happy, and very consensual way. Like, yeah. Okay. Final answer. Favorite subclass. We got Ancestral Guardian, Echo Knight, Chronergy, Divination, or Glamour Bard. You know what?
Narrowing down from 5, or like, let's get it down to 2. How about top 2 of those 5?
Okay, I'm going to give a top 2, and one of my top 2 is going to be a cop-out answer. Because I've actually decided one of my top 2 is going to be the Order of Hemomancy subclass that I homebrew for Oka as a blood hunter. Because you know what? I put my whole pussy in that. I put my entire entire pussy into that subclass. And I think my entire non-binary pussy. Let me just keep saying that word at the very end of our interview. And I'm very proud of it. So I'm gonna put that as one of the 2. And you know what? Chronergy Wizard. Chronergy Wizard is the other one.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. And the last moment of going over that, like, Chronal Shift is that sort of lucky feature of forcing a reroll. Any creature that you or any other creature within 30 feet throws a d20, you can make them reroll, and they have to use the second roll. Intelligence modifier added to your initiative rolls. Momentary Stasis, I also think is super fun. That is the 6th level feature. Force a large or smaller creature within 60 feet to make a con save. And then it's just, if it fails, it's just, nothing happens. It's just stuck until the end of your next turn. It's like, I think it's honestly like a slightly more balanced version of a Monk Stun, because it's stuck unless it takes damage, but it is incapacitated till the end of your next turn.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Arcane Abeyance at 10th level, you can cast a spell of 4th level or lower and freeze it in time in a little bead for an hour. And you can you or another creature can use your action to release the spell, or at the end of an hour, it vanishes. Never mind. And that's a short rest recharge. And then Convergent Futures. Yeah. 14th level, you or a creature within 60 feet throws a d20. You can use your reaction to ignore the die and decide whether it succeeds or fails. You do gain a level of exhaustion, but seems worth it to really just decide
that's
if someone
some god level
succeeds
power.
or fails.
That's some GM level power. Like, you know what? You got a nat 20, doesn't matter. You got a nat 20 on your save against me, doesn't matter. You fail.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think crucially, I don't know how this would like interface with a GM's legendary resistance feature, because you can choose to succeed if you fail. So I don't know if the wording of that would prevent a GM from using legendary resistance, because if it would, then that is super powerful.
I cannot wait to see how many people are going to weigh in on that.
Right?
I would want to give it to the player if they're willing to take a level of exhaustion.
Right?
This thing you can only use this, I think, once. Well, actually, I guess if you're willing to take exhaustions, you could probably do it, 3-4 times, and then find yourself stuck as the one place you don't want to be as a wizard, stuck, unable to move, or moving at half speed and rolling with disadvantage on everything. If my player was willing to do that to bypass a legendary resistance, I think I might want to give it to them. I don't know if, Jeremy Crawford's weighed in on that, and I'm sure the internet has a million opinions, but I feel like I'd want to give it to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. All right. Have heard it here. We have the Barbarian and Chronergy Wizard / Order of Hemocraft?
Hemomancy.
Yeah. Homebrewed Blood Hunter subclass. Connie, thank you so much for joining me. I am honored. I am humbled. I am so happy to get to spend this time with you. That was really wonderful. I really appreciate it so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on, Colin. It was a total joy and pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, thank you. Check out Transplanar RPG. A new arc is starting, and I think by the time this episode is released, it will be. And what is the official start date?
Yeah, it's Saturday, June 24th. Of 2023.
There will be one episode in the books when this comes out. Probably, we think. So go check out Transplanar RPG, support the show. To touch on politics for a moment, now more than ever, it is important to support trans creators, content. I don't want to get too far into it, but I feel very strongly about this, so I am super happy. Any other things that you would like to plug? Any exciting things coming up that people should check out?
Buy and play Godkiller. Buy and play Godkiller. We haven't talked about it at all, but it's a game I wrote. By the time this comes out, it will be for sale on my itch, a digital only ash can of Godkiller, which is an original Holy Punk PBTA game for one player, the Godkiller, and one GM God. Ooh. So if that's interesting to you, just search up Godkiller First Blood. It should be the first result on itch, and you can buy it at this time for $20, the digital PDF. But people who pre-ordered it got 20% off, so they could buy it for $15. Cool. But that's a pretty good deal if you ask me.
That's a pretty good deal for a pretty cool game written by an amazing, super cool human. And yeah, I don't know. I don't have an outro yet. I guess we'll
figure it out
in a while. I'll figure it out eventually, and I'll probably re-record it a million times.
Exactly. We can also keep talking, and you can fade it down. You can just slowly fade our voices out.
It slowly put the music goes away.
Yeah. The music's gonna start playing.
It's beautiful. Stuff's happening.